To be followed by Mike Rumbles.
Presiding Officer, this year's programme for government is another unambitious one, the third in succession. The centrepiece of any government at this difficult time should be to do everything possible to boost economic recovery, to help small businesses and ordinary families who are struggling and nervous about their future. They look to both governments, the UK and the Scottish Government, to prioritise their issues. This is what the government will be judged on: their concern for the person on the street, the first-time home buyer, the struggling small business, the person unexpectedly unemployed in the twilight of their career, the school leaver now competing against more applicants than usual to get into higher education. A recession with global trends, a global impact and worldwide ramifications. No, this is not the time to reduce our focus to asking the public whether Scotland should be inwards and independent from the UK. Divorcing ourselves from the union that has protected Scotland's interests through this global recession. It is not a time for a referendum on whether this SNP government should be given a mandate to enter into negotiations to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom. But it is a time to pull out all the stops and to give every possible chance for Scotland's economic recovery to get back on track and to go back to strength. No distraction from that goal is justified or supported in this Parliament. The people out there want their government to govern for the people and not the party. But the masses out there are not lobbying the Scottish Parliament for a referendum. No petitions, no campaigns. The single obstacle to independence is the lack of support from the Scottish people, not the opposition parties. What people are petitioning this Scottish Parliament on is issues such as the rights of disabled people, better housing, hospital cleanliness, knife crime. No petitions for a referendum on independence. The SNP chickened out of this with a no-thanks response. It didn't really suit their carefully crafted timetable. They think that they can woo the Scottish public into feeling patriotic on St Andrew's Day and vote for independence. Margaret MacDonald said it in her column yesterday, that it is a strategy and not a policy. She is right. It is a tactic. So whatever the reason the SNP have for their 2010 timing, you can be sure it's for their own ends. The SNP are desperately trying to force an interest where it does not exist. The nationalist conversation has persuaded no one for independence. Support for independence has actually fallen. It has never really risen above. If Mike Russell just gives me a chance to develop the point, I would be delighted to take an intervention. The nationalist conversation has not persuaded anyone yet that support for independence has actually risen. Indeed, it has fallen. And it has never really risen above a third of those who have been asked for their view.
Mike Russell.
I simply wanted to repeat my invitation to every Labour member who raises this issue that, as none have attended a national conversation event yet, then they are very prescient about what takes place. If they attend an event, then I think everybody would listen to them. Unfortunately, they haven't been, so they don't know.
Oh, well, we're told earlier that there's standing room only. I don't really believe it. But despite the 40 meetings around the country, despite the fact that they have made it their centrepiece, Mike Russell cannot get away from the fact that it hasn't shifted public opinion one iota. If anything, the current climate has resulted in more Scots supporting being part of the Union, perhaps with some changes. So we call for you to end this waste of public money. Your monologue is impressing no one. It was indeed Mike Russell who said that the current economic circumstances made the case for Scotland to have more say in its own affairs even more urgent and compelling. But the only person that I can find that agrees with him out there is Michael Forsyth. The First Minister says that there is a consensus for change. That may be true. But the consensus is to remain part of the United Kingdom. Devolution is still the settled will of the Scottish people, and we believe that it will for the foreseeable future. There is a consensus, I believe, to work towards stronger devolution. in the form of the Calman Commission, there is work that can be taken forward as a package of measures to improve our governance of Scotland. But you see, it's not a menu of convenience for the SNP to cherry-pick the measures that suit their own purpose, and we will not allow it on this side of the House. New powers for Scotland, new financial arrangements, more accountability, borrowing powers. These are issues which there is some consensus and we should take forward, but not for your ends. Margaret MacDonald would be delighted.
Margaret MacDonald.
I wonder if the member would say what would satisfy her as regards an improvement in the Scottish life and economy if the sort of powers that she is advocating at present were introduced. What, would she be like Alec Johnson? Would she want just a relative improvement, or would she want something much better than that?
McNeill.
It's easy to answer that whatever the powers of the Parliament are or are changed, of course, like everybody else, I want the most successful Scotland that we can be. But I believe, you see, now this leads into an important point. The Scottish Parliament has led the way on issues such as the smoking ban and climate change, but we didn't need independence to bring it about. You see, these achievements mentioned in the First Minister's statement have been achieved by devolution, in case they had noticed. The suggestion that we can only be proud Scots if we are an independent nation is a nonsense, if not insulting, and that we can only exploit our massive renewable energy potential if we are independent. It's a choice, but it's certainly not a fact. Tell this to those who are working in Scottish universities collaborating with English universities within a UK framework on our renewable energies. I think Margot's right that the tactics of the SNP are about what is in their own interest. To discredit the Union is part of their propaganda campaign, and they talk about Scotland facing
Should be finishing
cuts.
now, Ms McNeill.
But the reason the SNP can't fulfil the promises is because of their own behaviour. As Gordon Brewer said on Newsnight, when questioning the Finance Minister, the SNP are not batting with a straight bat on this one. Thank you.
Mike Rumbles.